Hey everybody, welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution, here on YouTube, on Facebook, and on TikTok. Um, so we are entering part 3 of our book, chapters 8 through 11. And if you are popping in to ask questions in the chat. If you're on Facebook, just make sure you drop your name or your screen name because for some weird reason, Facebook only shows uh, the Facebook user. It doesn't show like who's commenting, so everyone looks the same on Facebook. So just make sure you introduce yourself and let's get started. So chapters 8 through 11, in the book it's chapter 3. And the title of the chapter is The Return from the Corporal to the Spiritual Life. The subjects that will be covered in this chapter is the soul after death, its individuality, eternal life, the separation of the soul from the body, and the spirit's state of confusion after death. So those are the 3 subjects. Hi, Madrina. Hello. Oh my God, you're going to hang out. That's awesome. Okay. So let's get to it. So, question 149. What does the soul become after death? It becomes a spirit again. It returned to the spirit world, which it had left for a time. 150. Does the soul preserve its individuality after death? Yes, it never loses it. What would the soul be if it did not preserve its individuality? How does the soul preserve its individuality if it no longer has a material body? It still has a fluid proper to it, which it draws from its planet, and which retains the appearance of its last incarnation, the perispirit. Does the soul take anything else from this world? Nothing more than its memories and the desire to go to a better world. These memories are full of sweetness or bitterness depending on how the soul has lived its earthly life. The purer it is, the more it will comprehend the futility of what it has left behind on earth. 151. What about the opinion that the soul returns to the universal whole after death? Don't all spirits taken together make up a whole? When are you in a group? You are an integral part of it, and yet you still retain your own individuality. 152. What evidence is there for the soul's individuality after death? Don't you have such evidence through the communications you receive? If you were not blind, would you see? If you were not deaf, would you hear? Because frequently a voice speaks to you and reveals to you the existence of a being outside of yourselves. Those who think the soul returns to the universal whole at death are wrong if they mean that it loses its individuality like a drop of water falling into the ocean. Nevertheless, they are right if by the universal whole they mean the entire ensemblage of incorporeal beings of which each soul or spirit is a member. If souls were melded together in the universal whole, they would possess only the qualities of the whole and nothing to distinguish them from one another. They would have no intelligence or qualities of their own. However, in all their communications with us, they have revealed a consciousness of the self and a distinct will. The infinite diversity they display under all aspects is evidence of their individualization. If there were nothing after death except what is called the great whole, absorbing all individualities, that whole would have to be homogeneous, and the communications received from the invisible world would therefore all have to be identical. It is obvious that we are dealing with distinct beings, for we meet good and bad, knowledgeable and ignorant, happy and downcast beings of all natures, joyful and sad, frivolous and serious, etc. Individuality becomes even more obvious when these beings prove their identity through unmistakable signs and verifiable personal details related to their earthly lives. Furthermore, there can be no doubt about such individuality when they manifest as apparitions. The individuality of the soul has been taught theoretically as an article of faith, but Spiritism is a patent and, to a certain extent, material. 153. In what sense should we understand the eternal life? Only the life of the spirit is eternal. The life of the body is transitory and temporary. When the body dies, the soul returns to the eternal life. Wouldn't it be more correct to understand that the eternal life as that of the pure spirits who no longer undergo trials because they have finally attained perfection? That indeed represents eternal happiness, but it is all a matter of words. You may call things whatever you want as long as you understand the words you use. We are now on the subject of the separation of the spirit from the body. 154. Is the separation of the soul from the body a painful process? No. Frequently, the body suffers more during life than at the moment of death. The soul itself feels nothing at death. The suffering that is sometimes experienced at the moment of death is pleasure for the spirit, for it sees that the end of it is at the end of its exile is at hand. In a natural death that results from the depletion of organic vitality due to age, humans depart from life without even realizing it, like a light that goes out for lack of energy. 155. How does the separation of the soul from the body occur? Once the bonds that held the soul are ruptured, it disengages itself. Does this separation occur instantly or through an abrupt transition? Is there a well defined dividing line between life and death? No. The soul liberates itself gradually. It does not escape like a captive bird that is suddenly set free. These two states touch and blend each other. This way, the spirit disengages itself little by little from its bonds. They unravel, they do not break. The spirit is connected to the body during life by its semi material envelope, the semi spirit, or the perispirit. Death is the destruction of the body, but not of the perispirit envelope, which separates from the body when the organic life ceases. Observation has shown that at the moment of death, the disengagement of the perispirit is not complete all of a sudden. It occurs gradually and may vary in speed according to the individual. For some, it is very quick indeed, and in such case, one could say that the moment of death is also that of liberation, which actually happens a few hours later. However, for others, especially those whose life has been materialistic and sensual, the separation takes much longer, sometimes lasting for days, weeks, and even months. This does not imply that there is any vitality remaining in the body or any possibility that it might return to life. It only means that an affinity persists between the body and spirit, an affinity that always depends on the importance that the spirit has given to their material life. It is logical to believe that the more the spirit has identified with matter, the more it will suffer upon separating from it. On the other hand, intellectual and moral activity and elevated thoughts initiate this separation even during corporal life, and when death finally occurs, the separation is almost instantaneous. All this is the result of studies involving individuals at the moment of death and demonstrates that the affinity that persists between the soul and the body in some individuals can be extremely painful. The spirit may even experience the horror of decomposition, which such a case is exceptional and peculiar to certain lifestyles and types of death. It also happens in some cases of suicide. 156. Can the final separation between soul and body occur before the complete cessation of organic life? Sometimes. In the death throes, the soul has already left the body, which has nothing left in it except organic life. The individual no longer has any self awareness, and yet a faint breath of life still remains. The body is a machine that is kept going by the heart, and it continues to live as long as the heart circulates blood in the veins, and for that, it does not need the soul. 157. At the moment of death, does the soul sometimes experience a yearning or an ecstasy entailing a foreglimpse of the world it is about to re enter? The soul often feels that the bonds holding it to the body are loosening, and consequently, it employs all its efforts to sever them entirely. Already partially released from matter, it beholds the future unfolding before it, and it enjoys the spirit state beforehand. 158. Can the example of the caterpillar, which begins by crawling on the ground, then shuts itself up into its cocoon in apparent death to be reborn into a brilliant existence, provide us an idea of terrestrial life, which is followed by the grave and then a new existence? A pale idea. The image is good, but you must not take it literally, as you are often prone to do. 159. What sensation does the soul experience at the moment it realizes that it is in the spirit world? Well, that depends. If it has done evil for the love of it, the spirit is at first ashamed of what it has done. However, it experiences something completely different if it has been morally upright. It feels relieved of a great weight because it does not fear the most scrutinizing glance. 160. Does a spirit immediately meet those whom it knew on earth and who died before it? Yes. Depending on the affection they had for one another, they frequently come to receive it as it strives to return to the spirit world, and they help free it from the bonds of matter. It also sees many whom it has lost sight of during its sojourn on earth. Additionally, it sees those who are in the errant state and goes to visit those who are still incarnate. 161. In violent or accidental death, when the organs are not yet debilitated by age or disease, does the separation of the soul and the cessation of life occur simultaneously? Usually, no. In any case, however, the instant that separates them is very short. 162. After being beheaded, for example, does an individual remain conscious for a few moments? Frequently. It remains so for a few moments until the organic life is extinguished once and for all. However, many times the fear of death causes a loss of consciousness before the actual moment of execution. This question refers simply to the consciousness that victims may have of themselves by means of the body and not as a spirit. If they do not lose consciousness before execution, they may preserve it for a few very short moments, but they must necessarily lose it with the organic life of the brain. This does not mean, however, that the perispirit has completely disconnected from the body. On the contrary, in all cases of violent death, i.e., when death does not result from a gradual extinction of the vital forces, the bonds that join the body to the perispirit are more tenacious, and complete separation is slower. We are now on the subject of the spirit's state of confusion after death. 163. Upon leaving the body, is the soul immediately conscious of itself? Immediately is not the right word. It remains in a state of confusion for some time. 164. Do all spirits experience the confusion that follows the separation of the soul and the body to the same degree and for the same amount of time? No. It depends on how evolved they are. Those who are already purified are almost immediately self aware because of their detachment from matter during corporal life. However, carnal individuals with impure consciousness retain the impression of matter much longer. 165. Does an understanding of Spiritism have any influence on the shorter or longer duration of this confusion? It has a very considerable influence because the spirit understood what its situation would be beforehand. The practice of good and purity of consciousness exerts the most influence, however. At the moment of death, everything appears confused at first. The soul needs some time to recognize itself. It feels dazed, like someone walking out of a deep sleep who tries to understand a situation. The lucidity of its ideas and the memory of its past return, and the influence of the matter from which it has just freed itself is extinguished, and the sort of fog that had obscured its thoughts is dissipated. The duration of the state of confusion following death varies greatly. It may last a few hours, several months, or even years. The ones who experience it for the least amount of time are those who have identified themselves with their future state during life because they immediately understand their situation. This confusion presents particular aspects depending on the character of the individual and especially depending on the type of death involved. In violent deaths, suicide, capital punishment, accident, stroke, mortal wounds, etc., the spirit is surprised and astonished. It does not believe itself to be dead. It stubbornly persists in asserting that it has not died. Moreover, it sees the body laying there and knows who it belongs to, but it does not understand that it is now separate. It seeks out loved ones and speaks to them, but cannot understand why they cannot hear it. This illusion lasts until the separation of the peri-spirit is complete, and only then does it realize its situation and understand that it is no longer part of the world of the living. The phenomenon is easy to explain. Surprised by its unforeseen death, the spirit is stunned by the sudden change that has taken place. It still believes that death is synonymous with destruction and annihilation, and since it continues to think, see, and hear, it does not consider itself to be dead. This illusion is strengthened by the fact that it finds itself in a body similar to that was to the one that was just left, and it has not yet ascertained its ethereal nature. Instead, it presumes that it is solid and compact like the other, and it is astonished when it is pointed out that the body is not tangible. It is a phenomenon similar to that of some inexperienced somnambulist who do not believe that they are asleep. They believe that sleep is synonymous with the suspension of the faculties, and since they see and think freely, they do not perceive that they are sleeping. Even in cases where death has not occurred unexpectedly, some spirits display this peculiarity. However, it is more generalized among those who had not thought of dying despite having been ill. This leads to the curious spectacle of spirits who attend their own funeral as though it was someone else's, and who speak as if it no and who speak of it as though it is in no way concerning of them, until they suddenly comprehend the truth. There is nothing more painful about the state of confusion following death for moral individuals. They are calm, and their perceptions are those of peaceful awakening. However, those whose conscience is not pure, it is full of anxiety and anguish, which intensifies as it regains self awareness. In cases of collective death, it has been observed that all those who perish at the same time do not always see one another immediately. In the confusion following death, each spirit goes its own way or concerns itself only with those in whom it takes an interest. All right, we are now on the next chapter. This chapter is entitled The Plurality of Existence, and the subjects in this chapter are reincarnation, the justice of reincarnation, incarnations of different worlds, progressive transmigration, the fate of children after death, gender in spirits, kinship affiliation, physical and moral likeness, and innate ideas. Let us get started. We are on the subject of reincarnation. 166. How can a soul that did not reach perfection during its corporal life complete the work of its purification? By submitting to the trial of a new existence. How does the soul accomplish this new existence? Through its transformation as a spirit. As it purifies itself, the soul, of course, undergoes a transformation. But for this to occur, it needs the trial of corporal life. Then, does the soul live many corporal existences? Yes. We all live many lives, and those who say otherwise wish to keep you in the ignorance in which they themselves dwell. That is their desire. So, from this principle, it seems that after having left one body behind, the soul then takes another. In other words, it reincarnates into a new body. Is that the case? Obviously. 167. What is the purpose of reincarnation? Expiation and humankind's progressive improvement. Without reincarnation, how could there be justice? Ooh, child. 168. Is the number of corporal lives limited, or does a spirit go on reincarnating forever? In each new life, a spirit takes another step on the planet of progress. When it has stripped itself of all impurities, it has no further need of the trials of corporal life. 169. Is the number of incarnations generally the same for all the spirits? No. Those who advance quickly spare themselves many trials. Nevertheless, since progress is almost infinite, a large number of successive incarnations are always required. 170. What does the spirit become after its final incarnation? A blessed spirit, a pure spirit. We're now on the subject of the justice of reincarnation. 171. On what is the doctrine of reincarnation based? On the justice of God and revelation. We will repeat this to you over and over. A good father always leaves the door of repentance open to his children. Doesn't reason tell you that it would be unjust to keep eternal bliss from those who have not enjoyed the opportunities needed to improve themselves? Aren't all people God's children? Is it only among selfish human beings that we find iniquity, insatiability, hatred, and unforgiving punishment? All spirits are en route toward perfection, and God furnishes them with the means of accomplishing it through the trials of corporal life. Out of divine justice, God permits them to accomplish in, in new experiences whatever they could not do or complete in a previous trial. It would not be consistent with equity or according to God's goodness to punish forever those who, regardless of their will, had encountered obstacles to their improvement in the surroundings in which they had been placed. If the fate of all human beings is irrevocably sealed after their death, it would mean that God does not weigh the actions of all on the same scales and that God does not treat everyone impartially. The doctrine of reincarnation, which consists in accepting the fact that humans have many successive lives, is the only one that is in line with the idea of God's justice concerning those of lower moral condition. It is the only one that can explain our future and give us hope because it offers us the means of atoning for those our errors through new trials. Reason confirms this, and it is what the spirits have taught us. Those who are aware of how imperfect they are derive consoling hope from the doctrine of reincarnation. If they truly believe in the justice of God, they cannot expect to be equal for all eternity to those who have done better than they. The thought that such imperfection will not exclude them forever from the supreme good, and the fact that they will be able to reach it through continued effort supports them a renewed, ugh, continued effort supports them and renews their courage. Who, at the end of one's life, does not regret having acquired a particular experience too late to have profited from it? This lately acquired experience will not be lost. However, it will be of benefit in a new existence. We are now on the subject of incarnation on different worlds. I'm just going to take off my robe because it is getting toasty in here. And every time I read this book, my spirits enter the room, and all of my spirits are very, very hot spirits. "172. Are all of our different corporal existences lived here on Earth? No, not all of them. They may be lived on other worlds as well. Those on this globe are neither the first nor the last, but they are of the most material and the farthest from perfection. 173. With each new corporal existence, does the soul pass from one world to another, or does it live several lives on the same globe? It may live many lives on the same world if it has not evolved sufficiently to go to a more advanced one. So we may reappear several times on Earth? Of course. Can we come back to it again after having lived on other worlds? Certainly. You may have already lived on other worlds besides Earth. 174. Is it necessary to live again on the Earth? No, but if you do not progress, you may go to another world that is no better, perhaps one that is even worse. 175. Is there any special advantage in coming back to live on Earth? No special advantage unless you come on a mission. However, in that case, you will progress nonetheless, just like you would on any other world. Would it be better to remain a spirit? No, no, no. That would keep you at a standstill. What you want is to evolve towards God. 176. After having incarnated on other worlds, can spirits incarnate on this one without ever having come here before? Yes, just as you can incarnate on other globes. All worlds are in solidarity. What you have not accomplished in one, you may accomplish in another. Then are there those who are on the earth for the first time? There are many, and at various degrees. Is there some kind of indication by which we may recognize a spirit who is on earth for the first time? That would be of no use to you whatsoever. 177. In order to arrive at the perfection and supreme bliss that are humankind's final aim, must a spirit have lived on all of the worlds in the entire universe? No. Because there are many worlds of like degree where the spirit would learn nothing new. Then how can we explain the plurality of a spirit's lives on the same globe? It may find itself there each time in varying different situations, which will provide it with many other opportunities to acquire experience. 178. Can spirits be reborn corporally on the world that is relatively less evolved than the one on which they have already lived? Yes. When they have a mission to fulfill in the name of progress, they joyfully accept the tribulations of this kind of existence because they furnish them a means for further advancement. Mightn't this occur as an expiation? And mightn't God send rebellious spirits to less evolved worlds? Spirits may remain at a standstill, but they never regress. Thus, their punishment consists in not advancing and in having to recommence badly used lives in an environment more suited to their nature. Who are the ones who must recommence the same existence? Those who have failed in their mission or failed in their trials. 179. Are the beings that inhabit each world all at the same degree of purification? No. It is like on Earth. There are some who are more advanced and some who are less advanced. 180. In passing from this world to another, does a spirit retain intelligence it possessed here? Yes, indeed, because intelligence is never lost. Such a spirit may not have the same means of expressing it. However, it depends both on its degree of purity and the state of the body it acquires. 181. Do the beings that inhabit different worlds have bodies similar to ours? Of course they have bodies because the spirit must be clothed with matter in order to act upon matter. This envelope, however, is more material or less so according to the degree of purity the spirit has reached. This is what determines the differences among the worlds through which we must pass, for there are many dwellings in God's house, and therefore many degrees. Some recognize this and are conscious of it here on earth, but others know nothing about it at all. 182. Can we accurately know the physical and moral state of the different worlds? We, the spirits, can only reply to you according to your degree of evolution. This means that we must not reveal those things to everybody because not all are in the same position to comprehend them. Hence, such revelations would be troubling to them. As spirits purify themselves, the bodies that clothe them also approach the spirit nature. Their matter becomes less dense and they no longer painfully drag themselves around on the ground. The needs of their physical bodies are less coarse and they no longer have to kill other living beings in order to feed themselves. They are freer and have a perception unknown to us, which enables them to see things far away in other worlds. They can see things through the eyes of their body that we cannot see only through thought. The purification of spirits is reflected in the moral perfection of the beings in which they are incarnated. The animal passions become weaker, and selfishness gives way to a fraternal sentiment. It is thus that on worlds more highly evolved than our own, wars are unknown and there are no motives for hatred or discord, because no one would dream of harming a fellow being. Their intuition concerning the future, which is a surety that a conscious void of remorse gives them, makes death no longer a cause for apprehension. Instead, they look upon it without fear and as a simple transformation. The lifespan on different worlds appears to be proportionate to the spirit's degree of moral and physical advancement, and this is perfectly logical. The less material the body is, the less it is subject to the torments that disorganize it. The purer the spirit is, the less it is subject to the passions that undermine it. This is a further design of Providence, whose desires for suffering to be as shortened as much as possible. 183. In passing from one world to another, must a spirit experience a new childhood? Childhood is necessary transition on all worlds, but it is not always as obtuse as it is on yours. 184. Can spirits choose the new world they will inhabit? Not always, but they may ask for and receive what they desire if they deserve it, because spirits only have access to worlds according to their degree of purification. If a spirit doesn't make a request, what determines the world on which they will reincarnate? Its degree of purification. 185. Is the physical and moral state of living beings on each globe perpetually the same? No. All worlds are subject to the law of progress. All begin like yours, in an inferior state. However, the earth will undergo a transformation. It will become a terrestrial paradise when all humankind chooses good over evil. Thus, the race that populates the earth today will disappear someday and will be replaced gradually by more highly evolved beings. Such races will succeed the current one, just as the current one succeeded others that were even less evolved. 186. Are there worlds on which the spirit no longer lives in a material body and only has peri-spirit as its envelope? Yes. And that envelope itself becomes so etherealized that to you it is as if it did not exist at all. That is the state of the pure spirits. So, based on this premise, it would seem that there is no precise line separating the state of the final incarnations and that of a pure spirit. There is no such line. The difference diminishes little by little, finally becoming imperceptible, like the night fading away at the first light of day. 187. Is the perispirit substance the same on all globes? No. It is more etherealized on some than on others. When it goes from one world to another, a spirit clothes itself with the matter proper for each world at a speed faster than lightning. 188. Do pure inhabitants do pure spirits inhabit special worlds, or do they inhabit universal space without being attached to any particular globe? Pure spirits inhabit certain worlds, but they are not confined to them as people are here on earth. They are much better than all others at being ubiquitous. According to some spirits, of all the globes that comprise our solar system, the Earth is one of those whose inhabitants are the least physically and morally advanced. Mars is even less advanced, whereas Jupiter is far superior in every aspect. The sun is not inhabited by corporeal beings, but it is a meeting place for high order spirits who radiate their thought from there to other worlds, which they govern with the aid of less evolved spirits by communicating with them through the universal fluid. Regarding its physical constitution, the sun could be a focus of electricity. It appears that all suns operate in the same way. Are you guys hearing this right now? He is talking about solar energy, okay? Electricity being harnessed by the sun before Tesla was a thing. Size and distance from the sun has no necessary bearing on the degrees of the other planets' development, because it appears that Venus is more evolved than Earth and Saturn less so than Jupiter. Many spirits who have animated, well known personalities on Earth are said to have reincarnated on Jupiter, one of the worlds nearest to perfection. It is surprising that on a globe so advanced, persons may be found who might not have been considered so very evolved when they lived here on Earth. However, this is not so astonishing if we consider the possibility that certain spirits who inhabit that planet could have been sent to the Earth to fulfill missions that do not place them in a very prominent position, at least by earthly standards. Second, between their earthly existence and their life on Jupiter, there may have been intermediate ones in which they evolved further. Third, on the world as this one, there are different degrees of development, and between those degrees, there may be as much difference as that separating the primitive from the civilized individual on the earth. Thus, the fact that they inhabit Jupiter does not mean that they are at the level of the most evolved beings, in the same way that all persons are not on the same level as scholars at the Institute simply because they happen to live in Paris. The conditions of longevity are not everywhere the same as they are here on Earth. Thus, an age based comparison is not possible. A person who died some years ago was evoked through a medium and stated that he had been reincarnated just 6 months ago on a world whose name is unknown to us. When questioned about his age there, he replied, I cannot calculate it because we do not count time like you. Moreover, our way of life is not the same. We develop much more quickly, so much so that it has been only 6 of your months since I came here. But I must say that in regards to intelligence, I am already about 30 years old here on Earth. Many similar replies have been given by other spirits, and these statements contain nothing implausible. After all, don't we see animals on Earth that reach full maturity? That reach full maturity in only a few months? Why shouldn't it be the same with human beings on other spheres? On the other hand, notice that the development acquired by a 30-year-old person on Earth may be only a type of infancy in comparison with what he or she could reach elsewhere. We would have to be very short sighted to consider ourselves the prototypes of creation. It would be demeaning to the divinity to believe that nothing else could have been created besides us. We are now on the subject of progressive transmigration. 189. From the time of its first form, does a spirit enjoy the fullness of his faculties? No. Like a human being, a spirit has its infancy. When they first come into being, spirits have no more than an instinctive existence, possessing only the consciousness of themselves and their actions. Their intelligence only develops little by little. 190. What is the state of the soul during its first incarnation? It resembles the state of infancy in corporal life. Its intelligence is only beginning to unfold. It tries its hand at life. 191. Are the souls of our primitives in a state of spiritual infancy? It is a relative infancy since they are already developed souls endowed with passions. So, do passions indicate development? Development, yes, but not perfection. They are a sign of activity and an awareness of the self. In the very young soul, intelligence and life exist only in a seed like state. The life of spirits as a whole follows the same phases as corporal life. The spirit passes gradually from the embryonic state to that of childhood. Over a succession of periods, it arrives at the adult state, which is that of perfection. But with the difference that there is no decline of decrepitude as in corporal life. Even though its life had a beginning, it will not have an end. And from our point of view, it needs an enormous amount of time to pass from spirit infancy to complete spiritual development. Furthermore, its progress does not all occur on one globe only, but on several. The life of the spirit is thus comprised of a series of corporal existences, each providing an opportunity for progress, in the same way that each corporal existence is comprised of a series of days over which the individual acquires greater experience and knowledge. Nevertheless, just as in human life, there are fruitless days. And likewise, in the life of a spirit, there are corporal existences that yield no improvement because it did not know how to live them productively. 192. Through perfect conduct in this life, can we hurdle all the degrees and become pure spirits without having passed through the intermediate ones? Like, can we cheat? Right? That's what he's asking. No, because what humans imagine as perfection is actually very far from it. There are qualities they neither know about nor comprehend. They may be as perfect as their earthly nature permits, but it is not absolute perfection. It is like a certain it is like certain children who, no matter how precocious they may be, must still pass through youth before arriving at maturity, or ailing individuals who must go through covalences before fully recovering their health. Furthermore, spirits must advance in knowledge as well as in morality, and if they have progressed in one sense only, they will have to do so in the other in order to reach the top of the ladder. Nevertheless, the more individuals advance in their present life, the shorter and less painful their subsequent trials will be. Can humans in this life at least assure themselves of a less bitter future existence? Yes, of course. They can reduce the length and difficulties of the path. Only the negligent remain at a standstill. 193. During their new existence, can humans regress to a lower level than the one they had previously reached? In a social position, yes. In spirit, no. 194. During a new incarnation, can the soul of a moral individual animate the body of a scoundrel? No, because a spirit cannot regress. Can the soul of a wicked individual become the soul of a moral one? Yes, if it repents, such would be the reward. The evolution of spirits is progressive and never regressive. They raise themselves gradually through hierarchy and do not descend from the level they have reached. In their different corporal lives, they may descend as individuals, but not as spirits. Thus, the soul of a powerful person may later animate a humble artisan, and vice versa. Because positions among individuals are frequently the inverse of the elevation of their morality. Herod was a king, and Jesus was a carpenter. Mic drop, right? 195. Mightn't the possibility of improving oneself in another existence lead some persons to persevere on the wrongful path? Sorry. Will lead some persons to perseverate on the wrongful path with the thought that they can always correct themselves later? Those who think that those who think that way do not really believe anything at all. The idea of eternal punishment does not restrain them either because their reasons reject it, instead, it leads them to question everything. If only reasonable means were used to guide humans, there would be no such skeptics. During its corporal life, an imperfect spirit may think, as you have stated, but once released from matter, it thinks very differently. It soon perceives that it is calculated badly, and so, to make up for it, it will carry an opposite sentiment into a new existence. Progress is accomplished thereby, which is why on the earth there are those who are more advanced than others. Some have already had the experiences that others have yet to go through. The latter acquire such experiences little by little. It depends on each individual to hasten his or her own progress or to delay it indefinitely. Persons who find themselves in a dreadful situation desire to change it as quickly as possible. Those who have convinced themselves that the tribulations of this life are the consequence of their own imperfections will seek to ensure a new existence that is less painful. This thought will draw them away from the wrongful path much more readily than the thought of eternal fire, which they know is pure nonsense. 196. Since spirits can only improve by undergoing the sufferings and tribulations of corporal existence, doesn't it follow that material life may be seen as a type of sieve or filter through which the beings of spirit world must pass in order to arrive at perfection? Yes, that is right. They improve during such trials by avoiding wrongdoing and practicing the good. However, it is only after many incarnations or successive purifications, and after a longer or shorter lapse of time, that according to their own efforts, they reach the goal meant for them. Does the body influence the spirit to improve it, or does the spirit influence the body? Your spirit is everything. Your body is a garment that rots. That is all. We have a material image of the various degrees of the soul's purification in the juice of the vine. It contains the liquor called spirits or alcohol, but it is weakened by the large quantity of foreign elements that alter its essence. It only reached absolute purity after several distillations, each removing a portion of the impurities. The alembic represents the body into which the soul must enter to purify itself. The foreign elements are like the perispirit, which is more and more purified as the spirit approaches purification. We are now on the subject of the fate of children after death. This can be a very tough subject for many, many people. So as I read, please, again, take it with a grain of salt. Again, I am sharing with you a spiritual doctrine of my tradition and of my culture. Do not feel at all like you have to subscribe to this. Do not feel at all like this is absolute truth. Um, Glean from it the little nuggets of wisdom that resonate with you and leave the rest behind, okay? Um, and I'm only saying that because I know the subject of children or the subjects of suicide or the subjects just of death in general and losing people that you love. It's just really, really hard to talk about, and I get that. So thank you for bearing with me and thank you for keeping an open mind. So let's move forward. 197. Is the spirit of a child who dies very young as advanced as that of an adult? Sometimes much more so because the child may have had more existences and may have therefore acquired more experiences, especially if he or she has progressed. Then can the spirit of a child be more evolved than that of its parent? That is frequently the case. Haven't you yourself often witnessed it? 198. Does the spirit of a child who dies very young without having done anything bad belong to the higher degrees? If such a child has done nothing bad, it has also done nothing good. God does not relieve such a spirit of the trials it must undergo. If it is pure, it is not because it was a child, but because it was already advanced. 199. Why is life so often cut short in childhood? The length of a child's life can be, for a spirit, the remainder of a former life that had been cut short before its due term. Moreover, the death of a child is often a trial or an expiation for the parents. What becomes of the spirit of a child who dies very young? It begins a new existence. If humans had only one life to live, and if afterwards their fate were sealed for all eternity, why would half the human race, why would half the human species who die while very young deserve to enjoy eternal bliss without having lived a full life of effort? And by what right would they be exempt from the also painful conditions imposed on the other half? Such an order of things could not be in accord with the justice of God. Through reincarnation, absolute justice is the same for all. The future belongs to all, without exception and without favoritism, and those who arrive last will have only themselves to blame. Individuals must have the merit of their actions, for which they are justly responsible for. Moreover, it is unreasonable to consider childhood as a state of innocence. Do we not see children endowed with the worst instincts at an age at which education could not have yet exerted its influence? What about those who seem to be born cunning and deceitful and treacherous, who even harbor instincts for thieving and murder, in spite of the good examples surrounding them? Criminal law absolves them when they commit misdeeds by considering them to have acted without discernment, driven more by instinct than deliberate intent. But where do such instincts come from, which differ so widely among children of the same age, reared under the same conditions, and subject to the same influences? Where do such precocious wickedness come from, if not from the imperfect nature of the spirit, since education has nothing to do with it? Those who are really wicked have progressed less and must therefore suffer the consequences, not of their acts during their present childhood, but of their previous lives. It is thus that the law is the same for all and that the justice of God extends to all. So I hope you guys understood that. I really want to make it very clear that he's not saying here that children who die deserve to die. He's not saying that. He's saying that the physical body, the idea of a spirit being inside of a child's body doesn't necessarily mean that that spirit is innocent, right? And that child could have one of two things. They could be an advanced spirit whose death was really more of a trial and a tribulation for the parents. And or it could be a child that lives but who is filled with a spirit who lived many incarnations before that was just wicked and ends up growing up to be a sociopath or a serial killer or whatever. But the point is to not get disillusioned by the physical body of a child and focus more so on the fact that we're talking about reincarnation of the spirit. Okay. So that's a really hard concept to sort of comprehend because I think, for me as a spiritist and, when I get readings, I get a lot of parents coming to me who want to speak to their child who passed. and want to know why, and becomes a huge conversation, and a very emotional state for the parent. And it's so hard to have these conversations with them because we don't understand the state of that child's spirit. They could have been a very evolved spirit whose whose premature death was more so for the spiritual evolvement of the parents. Or they could have been a very, very wicked spirit whose only purpose was to just be born for that moment and be gone. So whatever the case may be, those conversations are always tough to have. And so, this book is a really great opportunity to sort of sift through that and really work and meditate on those concepts in your mind. Um, Let us move on, right? Because we only have an hour, right? And we're almost done, actually. We only have a few more pages. So we're now on the subject of gender in spirits. 200. Are spirits male and female? Not as you understand it, because gender depends on organic composition. Love and sympathy exist among spirits, but they are not based on the affinity of sentiments. 201. Can a spirit who has animated the body of a man animate the body of a woman in a new existence and vice versa? Yes, since the same spirit can animate both male and female bodies. 202. When are when we are spirits, do we have a preference as to whether we will incarnate into a male or a female body? It matters very little to a spirit. It depends on the trials it must undergo. Because they are genderless, spirits can incarnate as either men, women, or everything in between. Since they must progress in every way, each gender, like each social position, offers them special trials and duties and new opportunities to acquire experience. The one who always incarnated as a man would only know what men know, and vice versa. We're now on the subject of kinship and affiliation. Hi, Diane. We are reading from the Spirits book by Allan Kardec. So this is the doctrine of Spiritism. Okay, Allan Kardec writes a whole series of spiritual books that really uh, sort of break down sort of the metaphysics and the parapsychology and the science behind spirits, the spirit world, and how we as mediums, channelers, psychics, and things like that, how we interact with them. He really, really breaks it down in all of these books. So um, I decided to start this series of reading these books because I understand that there are many, many people out here who have a very difficult time reading, either due to dyslexia or ADD or other sorts of learning disabilities. And so reading to them might be a helpful thing for them. And that's what I decided to do. So that's why we're doing this. So hopefully you found that information helpful. So we're now on the subject of kinship and affiliation. Number 203. Do parents transmit a portion of their soul to their children, or do they give them only an animal life, to which a new soul afterwards adds the moral life? They only give animal life. Since the soul is indivisible, daft parents may have intelligent children, and vice versa. 204. Since we have many existences, does kinship go back to previous ones? It could not be otherwise. The succession of corporal lives establishes ties among spirits dating back to former existences. Such frequently gives rise to the affinity between you and some spirits who you might think are strangers. 205. According to certain individuals, the doctrine of reincarnation appears to destroy family ties by carrying them back to previous lives. Is that true? Instead of destroying them, it extends them. Since kinships may be based on previous affections, the ties that unite members of the same family are less precarious. Moreover, reincarnation broadens the duties of fraternity because your neighbor or your servant may be a spirit who was formerly related to you by blood. It does, however, diminish the importance that some attach to their familial affiliation. I mean, because their father may be a spirit who had previously belonged to a different race or who had occupied a much different social position. How do you explain that? That is true, but such importance is founded on pride. What most people honor in their ancestors are title, class, and fortune. They would blush if they had had an honest shoemaker for a grandfather, but would boast if they had descended from a bougie of noble birth. No matter what people say or do, they will not prevent things from being what they are. For God does not regulate the laws of nature according to their vanity. So those of you who are sticking around to listen to me read, please understand that Alan Kardec is writing this book from the perspective of being a sort of skeptic, someone who's a scientific mind, which he was. He was a scientist and a teacher. And he's actually interviewing a medium who is channeling these spirits who are answering these questions. So that's why it's sort of being read almost like a dialogue between two people. Okay. Question 206. Since there are Since there may be no actual affiliation among spirits of particular family descendants, would it be foolish for the members to honor their ancestors? Ooh, this is a touchy one because you got ancestor veneration is a real trendy thing these days. So let's talk about it. Assuredly not, because they should feel happy belonging to a family in which more highly evolved spirits have incarnated. Although spirits do not proceed from one another, they have no less affection for those who are linked to them by family ties, for they are often attracted to this or that family because of affinities or previous connections. You may be very sure that the spirits of your ancestors do not feel honored at all with the respect you render them out of pride. Their merits do not benefit you except as you strive to follow their moral example. Only in that way can your memories not only be pleasant, but useful to them. So please understand what he's saying here is that ancestor veneration or this idea of honoring your ancestors is not like it's not necessary and it's not like it's useless, but it's more like you're really gleaning more of a moral benefit from it than you are a physical organic benefit from it. Because the ancestors of your family line are spirits of all different kinds who in previous incarnations could have been anybody. So it's really not so much about the blood ties, so to speak, but that spiritual connection of honoring those who have evolved um, before you, right? So now we're on the subject of physical and moral likeness. Question 207. Parents almost always transmit a physical likeness to their children. Do they also transmit a moral likeness? No, because their souls or spirits are different. The body proceeds from the body, but the spirit does not proceed from the spirit. There is no other link other than blood kinship among descendants. Where does the moral likeness that sometimes exists between parents and children come from? They are sympathetic. Spirits attracted by similarities of inclination. Question 208. Do the spirits of the parents exert an influence on their children after birth? A very great influence because, as we have already said, spirits should aid in one another's progress. As it is, the spirits of the parents have the mission of developing their children through education. This is a task for them. If they fail to perform it, they will be guilty. So don't be out here just having kids just for the sake of having kids. You literally have a moral obligation, according to this, to spiritually evolve your children. And that's not to say to indoctrinate them, but to allow their spirit to be of its fullest potential. That is the goal, right? Question 209. Why is it that good and virtuous parents sometimes have very bad children? In other words, why don't the good qualities of the parents always, out of affinity, attract good spirits as their children? Bad spirits may ask for good parents in the hope that their counsel will guide them along a better path. God often grants their wish. Question 210. Through their thoughts and prayers, can parents attract a good spirit instead of an imperfect one to indwell the body of their child? No. They can, however, improve the spirit of the child to whom they have given birth and whom has entrusted to them. It is their duty. Ill-natured children are a trial for their parents. Question 210. Where does the likeness of character come from, which so often exists among siblings and especially between twins? They are sympathetic spirits who are attracted by similar sentiments and who are happy to be together. Question 212. In children whose bodies were born joined or who have some of their organs in common, are there two spirits, that is, or two souls? Yes, but the resemblance often makes them seem to you as though there is only one. Question 213. But if spirits incarnate as twins out of sympathy, where does the aversion come from that may sometimes be noted between them? It is not a rule that twins must be sympathetic spirits. Bad spirits may desire to struggle together on the stage of life. 214. What are we to think of the stories of children fighting in their mother's womb? A figure of speech. In order to portray their hatred as ingrained, it is figuratively set before birth. Humans usually do not make sufficient allowance for images that are intended to be merely poetic. 215. Where does the distinctive character that we observe in each culture come from? Like humans, spirits also form families through similarities and tendencies. The purity of such tendencies depends on how evolved the spirits are. Additionally, cultures are large families where sympathetic spirits congregate, and the tendency that leads members of these families to congregate is the source of the individual likeness that exists within the distinctive character of each culture. Do you think that good and humane spirits would seek to live among unrefined and cruel people? No. Spirits are attracted to like-minded cultures just as they are attracted to like-minded individuals. They look for their own groups. 216. In their new lives, do individuals retain any traces of their moral character from former ones? Yes, that can happen. However, a spirit evolve as spirits evolve, they change, and their social position may change as well. If a master becomes a slave, his tastes will be very different, and it will be difficult for you to recognize him. Since a spirit is the same spirit in its various incarnations, its manifestations can have certain likenesses from one to the next. However, these will be modified through the customs of its new position until a notable improvement has completely changed its character. For example, the one who was proud and cruel can become humble and humane if it is repented. 217. During their different incarnations, do individuals retain any vestiges of their physical character from previous lives? The body is destroyed, and the new one has no connection to the old one. Nevertheless, the spirit is reflected in the body. Although the body is only matter, it is molded by the spirit's qualities, which impresses it with a certain character that is mainly visible in the face. For this reason, the eyes have been rightly described as the mirror to the soul, which means that the face most particularly reflects the soul. Thus, it may be that the individuals who are extremely unattractive physically can nevertheless project something pleasant if they are good, mindful, and humane spirits. On the other hand, there are very attractive faces that awaken nothing in you. You might even find them repulsive. How can you believe that only perfect bodies house high order spirits? when every day you encounter more individuals with deformed bodies. Although they may Although they may be no pronounced physical likeness, a similarity of tastes and tendencies can still pass with what we call the air of familiarity. The body that clothes a soul is a new incarnation, does not necessarily have any relation to the previous one, since it can proceed from a very different origin. It would therefore be absurd to conclude that a succession of lives is connected by a likeness that is strictly fortuitous. Nevertheless, a spirit's qualities almost always modify the organs that serve for its manifestation, impressing a distinctive stamp on the face and even on the general manner. Sorry. Thus, inside the humblest envelope, one might find expressions of greatness and nobility of spirit, while under the garment of a wealthy person, one can often find vulgarity and dishonor. Some persons who have risen from the lowest positions acquire the habits and manners of high society with hardly any effort. They seem to have returned to their rightful element, but others, in spite of their birth and education, always feel out of place there. How can this fact be explained except as a reflection of what the spirit was in former lives? Hmm. We are now on the subject of innate ideas. Question 218. Does an incarnate spirit preserve any trace of the perceptions it had had and the knowledge it had acquired in previous lives? A vague memory remains, giving the incarnate spirit what you call innate ideas. Okay, well, then the theory of innate ideas is not just a myth. No, because the knowledge acquired in each existence is not lost. When a spirit is free from matter, it always recalls such knowledge. While incarnate, it might forget it particularly and temporarily, but the intuition that remains helps it advance. Without it, it would always have to start over. Instead, with each new existence, the spirit starts from the point at which it finished the preceding one. Then, isn't there a very close connection between the two successive existences? Not always, as close as you might think, because the conditions of the two lives are often very different. Also, the spirit may have progressed in an interval between them. 219. I'm going to take a pause and drink my rum and coke for a second. I suggest you guys take a sip as well. Mm. What is the origin of the extraordinarily what is the origin of extraordinary abilities of those individuals who, without any previous learning, seem to have an intuition about certain areas of knowledge, such as language and mathematics? A memory of the past and the soul's previous progress, of which it now has no awareness. Where else could such abilities have come from? Bodies change, but the spirit does not. It merely changes its garment. 220. In changing bodies, can spirits lose certain intellectual faculties? Like, for example, could they cease to have a taste for the arts? Yes. If they dishonored that faculty or made a bad use of it, moreover, a faculty that remains dormant throughout an entire existence because the spirit wishes to exercise an unrelated one, in that case, it remains latent, but it reappears later. 221. Are the instinctive sentiments of the existence of God and the presence of the future life due to the retrospective memory that humans have even in the primitive state? They are memory. They have retained and they knew of spirits before incarnating. But pride often stifles this sentiment. Is it the same memory to which are owed certain beliefs related to the Spiritist doctrine, in which are found in our cultures? The doctrine is as old as the world. That is why we find it everywhere. Proof that it is true. Since it preserves an intuition of the spirit's state, the incarnate spirit possesses an instinctive awareness of the invisible world. This awareness, however, is frequently distorted by prejudices as well as by superstitious arisings from ignorance. All right, guys, we are on the very last chapter, and it's only like maybe 6 pages. So we're almost done. You guys are sticking in there. Great job. So now this last chapter is called The Considerations Concerning the Plurality of Existence. And there's not really any subcategories, it's just one straight read. So let's do it. Some persons have stated that the doctrine of reincarnation is not new, that it was taken from Pythagoras. We have never said the Spiritist doctrine is a modern invention, since Spiritism stems from the very laws of nature. It is obvious that it must have existed since the beginning of time, and we have always sought to show that traces of it may be found in remotest antiquity. It is well known that Pythagoras was not the creator of the theory of metapsychosis. He took it from the Hindu philosophers and the Egyptians who had believed in it from time immemorial. The idea of the transmigrations of souls was therefore a common belief, accepted by the most eminent individuals. By what road did this idea come to them? Was it by revelation or intuition? We do not know. Whatever the case may be, an idea could not have been traversed the ages and have been accepted by the most advanced minds if there were not something to it. The ancientness of this doctrine should therefore be, if anything, a proof in its favor rather than an objection against it. However, it is equally known that between the metapsychosis of the ancients and the modern doctrine of reincarnation, there is this one main difference. The spirits absolutely reject the transmigration of human souls into animals and vice versa. In teaching the doctrine of the plurality of corporal existences, the spirits have thus renewed a doctrine that was born during the earliest of ages, and which has been preserved up to our time in the innermost thought of many persons. However, the spirits have presented it from a more rational point of view, more according to the progressive laws of nature and more in harmony with the wisdom of the Creator, by divesting it of all the accoutrements of superstition. A point worth noting is that it is not only in this book that they have taught it recently. Even before it was published, numerous communications of the same nature have been received in many regions, and they have multiplied considerably since then. Moreover, it might be pertinent to examine why it is that not all the spirits seem to be in agreement regarding this doctrine. We shall revisit that issue later. But for now, let us examine the issue at hand from another angle, apart from any revelations by the spirits. We shall put them aside for the moment and assume that this theory did not come from them at all. Let us even assume that we have never even pondered it together with the spirits. Let us instead place ourselves in a neutral position for the time being and accept the same degree of likelihood of truth for both the hypothesis of the plurality of the corporeal existences and that of a single existence. And let us see towards which side reason and our own interests will take us. Some individuals reject the idea of reincarnation for the simple reason that it is inconvenient to them. They declare that one existence is quite enough, and that they have no desire to recommence into a similar one. We even know persons who become infuriated at the mere thought of returning to Earth. We would ask them whether God ought to ask for their advice and consult their wishes in setting the universe in order. One of two possibilities applies. Either reincarnation is a fact, or it is not. If it is useless for these individuals to oppose it. They will have to undergo it without God asking for their permission. Opposing it would be the same as a diseased man saying, I have already suffered too much today. I don't want to suffer anymore tomorrow. No matter how unwilling he may be, he will not suffer any less tomorrow and in the days that follow until he is cured. Likewise, if those individuals must live again corporally, they will do so. They will reincarnate. They will protest in vain like a child who does not want to go to school or a criminal condemned to prison because they will have to reincarnate nevertheless. Objections of this type are too childish to deserve a more serious examination. However, in order to reassure such persons, we will state that the Spiritist doctrine of reincarnation is not as terrible as they might think, and that if they were to study it in depth, they would realize that they have nothing to fear. They would understand that each new existence depends on themselves and that it will be happy, and that it will be happy or unhappy according to what they are doing in their present life. From from this life onward, if they improve themselves to a certain degree, they will never have to fear falling back into the swamp. We will presume that we are addressing persons who believe in some kind of future after death, rather than those who believe that only nothingness awaits them, or that or those who wish to immerse their soul into the universal whole without preserving their individuality, like drops of rain falling into the ocean, which is pretty much the same thing. If you believe in any kind of future at all, you certainly do not suppose that it will be the same for all, because that would imply that doing good during one's life would not matter in the end. In other words, why restrain ourselves? Why not satisfy all of our passions and all of our desires, even at the expense of others, if our future will be neither better nor worse for it? If, on the other hand, you believe that the future will be happier or less happy according to what one does in life, would you not desire to make it as happy as possible because it will have implications for all eternity? Do you, by any chance, fancy yourself as being one of the most perfect creatures who has ever walked the earth, and thus have an immediate right to the bliss of the elect? I would not think so. Thus, without your having to consider yourself among the rep- reprobate, you must admit that there are those who deserve and have a right to a better situation more than you. Well, then, mentally place yourself for a moment in that middle position, which, as you admit, you occupy at the moment, and imagine that someone says to you, "You suffer, you are not as happy as you could be, whereas there are others all around you who seem to enjoy perfect happiness. Would you like to trade your situation for theirs?" "Of course I would," you reply. "But what do I have to do?" "Almost nothing. Simply start over what you have done badly and try to do it better." Would you hesitate to accept this proposition, even if it cost you many lifetimes of trial? Let us make a more prosaic comparison. Suppose you were to say a man who, although not in extreme poverty, is going through some hard times due to his precarious resources. There is a huge fortune for you to enjoy, however, you must work hard for it for exactly 1 minute. If he were the laziest being on earth, he would not hesitate to say, "I'm willing to work for 1 minute, 2 minutes, an hour, a whole day if necessary. What difference would it make if my life will end up in abundance?" Well, then, what is that duration of one corporal life when compared to eternity? Less than a minute, less than a second. We sometimes hear this sort of reasoning. God, who is supremely good, would not impose on us the obligation to recommence another series of misfortunes and tribulations. Do they by chance believe that God would show more kindness in condemning people to eternal suffering because of a few moments of error than in granting them the means to repair their wrongs? Two manufacturers each had a worker who aspired to partnership, but on one particular day, both workers were unproductive and deserved to be fired. One of the manufacturers actually fired his worker despite his pleas, and since he was unable to obtain other employment, he died in poverty. The other, however, said to his worker, "You have wasted a whole day, so you owe me compensation. You have performed badly, so you owe me reparation. However, I will let you start over tomorrow if you perform well. I will keep you, and you will be able to continue aspiring to the higher position I promised you." It is necessary to ask which of the two manufacturers was more humane. So, would God, who is clemency itself, be more inflexible than humane? There is something poignant in the idea that our fate is sealed forever because of a few years of trial, even considering the fact that reaching perfection did not depend on us while on earth. Whereas the opposite idea is eminently consoling. It gives us hope. Therefore, without deciding either for or against the plurality of existence, and without favoring one hypothesis over the other, we will simply state that if the choice could be made, no one would choose a sentence that could not be appealed. A philosopher once said that if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent one for the contentment of humankind. The same could be said of the plurality of existence. As we have stated previously, God does not ask for our permission, nor does God consult our preferences. Things either are or they are not. Based on such considerations, let us see on which side the odds might lie. Let us consider the matter from another point of view, still omitting the teaching of the spirits, and examine the issue solely on a philosophical endeavor. If there is no reincarnation, then it is obvious that there can be only one corporal existence. Thus, if there is only one corporal existence, then the soul of each individual must be created at birth, unless we accept the preexistence of the soul. However, if that were the case, we would have to ask what the soul was before birth if such a pre-existent state would not comprise of an existence of some kind or other. There is no middle ground. Either the soul existed before the body or it did not. And if it existed, what was its situation? Did it or did it not possess self-awareness? If it did not, that would be about the same as saying that it did not exist at all. However, if it did exist, was its individuality progressive or stationary? In either case, what was its situation when it joined the body? According to the common belief, which assumes that the soul is born at the same time as the body, or likewise, that before incarnation it possessed only negative faculties, we must ask the following questions. Why does the soul display aptitude that are so different from and independent of the ideas acquired by education? 2. Why do some very young children display an extraordinary aptitude for a particular area of knowledge while others are left in mediocrity throughout their entire lifetime? 3. Why do some children seem to be endowed with inborn or intuitive ideas that are lacking in others? 4. Why do certain children demonstrate precocious impulses towards vice or virtue, or innate sentiments of dignity or baseness that contradict or that contrast so strikingly with the environment in which they have been born? 5. Why is it that some individuals, regardless of their education, are more advanced than others? 6. Why are there both uncivilized and civilized peoples? If we took a Hottentot, baby at birth, raised it, and then sent it to one of our most renowned schools, could we make it into a Laplace or a Newton? He's labeling philosophers, sorry. These are names you guys probably don't know about. We would ask that philosophy or theosophy might solve these problems. Either souls are equal at birth or they're not. That we cannot doubt. If they are equal, why are there such differences of aptitude? One could respond that it depends on the physical organism. But in that case, we would have a most monstrous and immoral doctrine. Human beings would be no more than a machine at the whim of matter. Then they would not be responsible for their own actions, since everything could be attributed to their physical imperfections. However, if souls are unequal, then it's because God creates them so. Then we must ask, why is unborn mental superiority granted to some and not to others? Would such favoritism be consistent with the justice and love that God grants to all creatures equally? On the other hand, everything can be explained if we admit to a succession of prior and progressive existences. At birth, individuals bring with them the intuition of what they have already acquired. They are more evolved or less so according to the number of lives they have lived. and according to how near or far they are from their starting point. It is exactly like in a group of individuals of all ages, wherein each one will have progressed according to the number of years he or she has lived. Successive lives represent for the life of the soul what years represent to the life of a body. For example, on the same day, bring together 1,000 individuals ranging from 1 to 80 years old. Now, suppose that some sort of veil has been mysteriously cast over all of their previous days, so that you unwillingly believe that all of them were born on the same day. You would naturally ask why some are big and others are little, some are old and some are young, some are educated and some are still ignorant. Nevertheless, if the cloud hiding their past were removed, if you were to suddenly realize that all of them have lived for a longer or shorter amount of time, then everything would be explained. God, out of divine justice, could not have created some souls more advanced or less advanced. With the plurality of existence, the inequality that we see displays nothing contrary to the strictest equity. There seems to be inequality merely because we see the present only and not the past. Does this argument rest upon some theory, some gratuitous supposition? No, because we start from a patent and incontestable fact, the inequality of aptitudes and intellectual and moral development. We have found that this fact cannot be explained by any currently accepted theory, whereas other theory gives it is simple, natural, and a logical explanation. Would it be rational to prefer the one that explains nothing to the one that explains everything? Regarding the sixth question, let me just go back. Regarding the sixth question, it will doubtless be stated that Plotinus, who's a philosopher, are less advanced. But then we ask, are they or are they not human? If they are human, why would God have denied them the privileges granted to Caucasians? And if they are not humans, then why try to make them Christians? The Spiritist doctrine is much more encompassing than all of that because it reveals that there are no several species of human beings, but only humans as a whole. Their spirits are at different stages on the scale of advancement, but they are all disposed to continually evolve. It's this, not more, in harmony with the justice of God. Heretofore, we have considered it's so funny when I read this sometimes I forget that this was written in like the 1600s because the language that's used here is like so just not what we use. And he was a French man, so like a lot of his references are about like French philosophers and stuff like that. Anyway, herefore too, we have considered the soul according to its past and its present. However, if we consider it with respect to its future, we will encounter the same types of problems. Number one, if the present life is decisive for our future destiny, what will be the respective positions in the future life for those of less advanced cultures and those of highly advanced cultures? Will they be on the same level or divided regarding their eternal bliss? Two, will those who have worked their entire lives to improve themselves be on the same level as those who have remained undeveloped, not due to their own fault, but due to either the lack of time or the ability to improve themselves? Three, are those who have practiced wrongdoing because they were unable to enlighten themselves liable for a state of affairs that did not depend on them? Four, efforts are made to enlighten, moralize, and civilize people, but for everyone who have become enlightened, there are millions who die every day before that light has managed to reach them. What is their fate? Will they be treated as reprobates? If not, what have been done to deserve to be on the same plane as others? Five, what is the fate of children who die at a very early age before having done their good or their evil? If they're moving if they are among the elect, why are they granted such a favor without having done anything to deserve it? And by what privilege have they been exempt from the tribulations of a full lifetime? Is there any doctrine that can solve these issues? However, accept the existence of successive lives and everything can be explained in conformity with God's justice. What we are unable to accomplish in one existence, we will in another. Thus, no one escapes the law of progress. All will be rewarded according to their true individual merit, and none will be excluded from their supreme bliss to which they aspire, no matter what obstacles they may have encountered along the way. Such issues could have could be multiplied to infinity because the psychological and moral problems that have no solution other than the plurality of existence are innumerable. We have restricted ourselves only to the most general. Nevertheless, it may still be argued that the doctrine of reincarnation has not been accepted by the church. It would therefore be the subversion of Christianity. It is not our objective at the moment to address this issue, since it is sufficient for us to have shown that the doctrine is eminently moral and rational. Furthermore, it is moral and rational. What is moral and rational cannot be contrary to a religion that proclaims God as goodness and reason par excellence. What would have become Christianity if, contrary to universal opinion and testimony of science, it had denied the evidence and expelled whomever did not believe in the movement of the sun and the 6 days of creation? What credit would a religion deserve, and what authority would it have among enlightened nations if it were based on such obvious errors that were once articles of faith? Whenever evidence has been proven, the church has widely sided with it. If it is proven that things exist which would be impossible without reincarnation, if certain points of church dogma cannot be explained except by such means, then it will be necessary to accept it and realize that antagonism between this doctrine and the church dogma is only apparent. Later, we will show that perhaps the church is closer to the doctrine of reincarnation than it seems, and that would suffer no more in accepting it than it suffered from the discovery of the movement of the earth around the sun and the geological periods, which at first also seemed to contradict the sacred texts. Moreover, the principle of reincarnation appears in many scripture passages and is found especially and explicitly formulated in the Gospels. And now he quotes the Gospel of Matthew 17, where it talks about this. It says, descending from the mountain after transfiguration, Jesus commanded them, saying, do not tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from among the dead. His disciples then questioned him, then why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? And Jesus responded, in truth, Elijah is to come first and will reestablish all things, but I declare you that Elijah has already come, and they did not know him, but made him suffer everything they wished. It is true that they will put to death the Son of Man. And then his disciples understood that he had spoken to them of John the Baptist. So he spoke about the reincarnation of John the Baptist. If John the Baptist was Elijah, he must have been the reincarnation of the spirit of the soul of Elijah in the body of John the Baptist. Whatever may be the opinion that persons have about reincarnation, whether they accept or reject it, no one will escape it by merely believing to the contrary. The essential point is that the teaching of the spirits is eminently Christian. It rests upon the immorality of the spirit of the soul, future punishment and reward, God's justice, human free will, and the morals of Christ. It is therefore not anti-Christian. As stated previously, our reasoning up to this point has excluded all spiritist teachings, which certain individuals regard as being without authority. If we, as so many others, have adopted the doctrine of the plurality of existence, it is not only because it comes from the spirits, but because it has seemed to us to be the most logical and the only one that resolves issues until now have been irresolvable. If it had come to us from a mere mortal, we would have adopted it just the same, not hesitating to give up our own former ideas. The moment of error is exposed, our self-esteem has more to lose than to gain in sustaining it. In the same way, we would have rejected reincarnation, even though it had come from the spirits, if it had seemed to us to be contrary to reason, just as we have rejected so many other doctrines. We know by experience that we must not blindly accept everything that comes from spirits, in the same way that we cannot accept everything that comes from human beings. To our minds, it is the first merit is that it's eminently logical. Another merit is that it is confirmed by the facts, positive facts, material ones, so to speak, which an attentive and well reasoned study may reveal to whoever strives to observe them with patience. I'm on the last page, you guys. And perseverance, and before which doubt is no longer possible. Once these facts become widely known, then, like the formation and movement of the earth, it will be necessary to yield to the evidence, and its opponents will have wasted opposing arguments in vain. In sum, we recognize the fact that the doctrine of the plurality of existence is the only one that can explain what would be unexplainable without it, and that is eminently consoling and conforms to the strictest justice. For humankind, it is life preserving that God, out of divine mercy, has thrown to them. The words of Jesus himself can leave no doubt about this, as we read in the 3rd chapter of John's Gospel, verse 3. In reply to Nicodemus, Jesus states, "Truly, truly, I say to you that if a man is not born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." Nicodemus says to him, "How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter again into his mother's womb and be born a second time?" Jesus responds, "Truly, truly, I tell you that unless he is born of water and of spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. What is born of flesh is flesh, and what is born of spirit is spirit. Do not be amazed that I have told you, you must be born again." The end. Well, not the end, but the end of that chapter. So, Jesus speaks there not of this idea of born again Christianity, but this idea of reincarnation is really where that comes from. So, hopefully, you guys liked the reading of these 3 chapters. I'm going to kind of go through some of these questions that you guys have here um, to see what it is that you guys might be curious about. Okay. So those of you who missed chapters 1 through 7, because this was chapters 8 through 11, you can go on my YouTube page, The Magical Solution, that's magical with a CK, and you can listen to the first 7 chapters. Okay, so now let me look at some of the questions over here to see if there's anything you guys have. Hi, guys! Many of the teachings in this book is similar to Buddhism, very much so, and Hinduism. Okay. Oh, thank you. I have a friend that told me that her deceased husband came to her when she hugged him and kissed him. He said to her, "You know this is make believe. Why do you think he said that to her?" So wait, I have a friend that told me that her deceased husband came to her and when she hugged him and kissed him, he said to her, "You know this is make believe. Why do you think he said that to her?" Okay. So I don't know who this Facebook user is who asked that question, but if you let me know your username, I can address you directly. So what that sounds like to me, so a spirit came to your friend and hugged him, or was this a person who was on their deathbed and said that to them? Because that does kind of make a difference in why I would think why my answer would change in that sense. But if it's a spirit who hugged her and kissed her and said that to her, it makes sense to me because he's basically talking about the disillusionment of this physical world. In Buddhism and in Hinduism, they call it Maya, right? It's this idea of samsara, right? This idea of like everything is an illusion. And really the only thing that's real is spirit. And so when that spirit came to her and said, "This is all make believe," he was really saying, "Relax." Like what this physical world that you're dealing with right now, it's not real. Learn the lessons that you need to learn and you will once you pass, things will make sense, right? The spirit will make sense of this, right? Um, Danielle, I love this. Have you ever read Emanuel Swedenborg? No, I have not. Please leave me a couple of names of books, or I'm gonna make sure I write that down, and I will definitely check out some of that person's stuff. Emmanuel, okay, and then that last name, Swedenborg, Swedenborg. All right, thank you. I'll look into that person. Thank you. That's what I think. That's what I think, Facebook user. Now, if that person had been alive and said that, I honestly, I would feel like, honestly, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. I speak better for the dead than I do for the living. I'll be honest with you on that one. I really do. But yeah, let her know. Let her know that she can find comfort in the idea that when this is all over, it's not painful. The transition is progressive and is more about her spirit evolution. All of us here who are alive, our crossing over is not, it's just another step in the process. You know what I mean? It's not like this end all be all situation. So, understand that and take comfort in that. And being an espiritista, being a spiritist person, our job is to assist spirits of those lower vibrations who are stuck here on this earth, to help them cross over so that they can then start their new cycle, so they can help evolve. You know what I mean? If they're stuck here, they don't get to progress. And that's, I've actually heard people say, "Oh, not all spirits are meant to cross over," and "Oh, they don't want to cross over," and "I don't feel right crossing them over." Well, then you're not doing your job. If you call yourself a spiritist, if you call yourself an espiritista, you're not doing your job. The spirits, the ghosts, if you will, are not supposed to be here. They're stuck here, and that's a problem. So our job is to assist them and move them over. And Alan Kardec helps to sort of give you the understanding of how that works and what the science is behind that, what the philosophy is behind that. And then of course it's mixed in with a little bit of Catholicism, and it's mixed in with a couple of other Afro-Cuban kind of ideas, at least when it comes to the island, because remember, this all started in France. um, and it's mixed in with our cultural stuff, and that's when we start getting some of the rituals and some of the prayers and some of the music, and all of that starts to get involved in this whole mixture, and it grows as a culture. um so I'm glad for a moment that you hung out with me, guys. Let's do chapters 9. What is it? Chapters 12 to 15. Next, let's pick a day. Let's pick a day. Let's do I'm off tomorrow. I don't know how you guys are feeling tomorrow, but I'm off. I don't mind reading again tomorrow. So 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Let's meet up here and we'll continue on. All right. Thank you guys so much. For those new faces, those new people, please, follow me, watch my videos. For those who are on YouTube and Facebook, please follow and subscribe to my channel, watch my videos, and share. I would really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much, and have a beautiful night.